Hi, I'm Katie Crane, and this is the Pilates Lounge. Hi, I'm Katie Crane, the Pilates professional. Welcome to another episode of the Pilates Lounge podcast. Today I'm going to be sharing a little bit of a story with you. This is one chapter of my life story, and I'm sharing it with you because I know that we all have a story to share, but B, because I hope that my story sheds some light on some people's darkness, empowers some people who feel disempowered, but also reminds us all that the stories that we hold and the stories that we should be sharing are unique to us. Nobody else shares the story that you have. Nobody else has lived the chapter that you have lived. And partly this story is all about recognizing as Pilates professionals that when we work with people, their choices matter. Whatever it is that they decide to do for their health is absolutely right for them. We in no way should play any role in those decisions. What we should do is create an open space, a willingness to learn from other people, and a welcoming for people to be able to share their stories in a way that we create space for them, that we nurture them, and that we are willing to simply learn from them. The thing is with my story, I don't share it very often. And well, this part of my story anyway. And I think that is because I know that the choices that I make are not common. The choices that I make offend people, trigger people. They actually make people angry. And I know that because I've been told that the choices that I make have been irresponsible, unfounded, not supported by the science, and that a lot of the choices that I make apparently don't have any scientific backing at all. But the choices that I've made have worked for me, and that's all that matters. So I live with endo, I have lived with pelvic pain, and I live with fibroids. Sometimes those conditions have tormented me, they have ruled me, they have prevented me from doing things that I wanted to, they have spun me into deep depression, they have confused me, and they have caused havoc in my life. But over the years, I have learnt to love my conditions, and I have realized that they do not define the person that I am. They are simply things that I learn to live with. The thing is with chronic pain, chronic conditions, and if you want to say chronic diseases, however you want to put them, quite often they do define people. And quite often they put a lot of fear into people's lives and they hold people back, and people succumb to the negativity of these conditions. But for me, and it hasn't been easy, not only have I learned to love myself because of these conditions, but they have also empowered me to love other people deeply with more sincerity, and for me to feel a lot more empathy for people as well. And I figure that that must be one of my life's lessons. It's as simple as that. Now, we don't end up with endopelvic pain or fibroids overnight. It's not just something that happens to us and we had no role to play. I believe that anything that we experience is meant to be. It is part of our journey. It is part of our life's lessons. And it's up to us to decide whether or not those lessons are a blessing or a curse. Sometimes I have felt that living with pain can be a curse. Sometimes I have felt that living with fibroids and endo has held me back. And I've had some horrible experiences over the years. One time in particular, when my son was about maybe 6 or 8 months old, we were in Bali. We spend a lot of time in Bali. And we'd just gotten out of the swimming pool at the hotel we were staying at. And, my son, like being so young, like the swimming pool just floored him. He was ready to go back to the room for a nap. And so as a family, we got out of the pool. I had my towel wrapped around me. I was still in my bathers. I had my son wrapped up in a towel and he was like dozing off to sleep. And as we walked through the lobby of the hotel, we bumped into a friend that we hadn't seen for years. So we stopped and spoke to him. And I was kind of, still dripping with water a little bit. You know how like water kind of runs from your bathers down your legs and stuff. And that was fine. I kind of just kept patting myself down with my free hand as I was holding my son in my other hand or arm. And I looked down for a moment and in horror, I'm looking at a pool of blood on the floor. There I am standing next to my husband, holding my sleeping son in my arms with blood dripping down my legs onto like this marble floor. And the boys didn't realize, my husband and my friend didn't realize, but I remember like my face just froze and I must have looked really angry all of a sudden because I remember my husband looking at me like, what is wrong with you? Why are you so cranky? And maybe I was cranky a lot back then. But I just looked down at the pool of blood and I let my towel slide from my son that he was wrapped in. I just kind of let that fall onto the floor and I stood on it so it covered the blood. And I said to my husband and my friend, I need to change Cassidy, like I need to change his nappy. And I just ran off. And I ran off. It was horrible. There was like blood everywhere. It was clotting. It was heavy. It was all over my lower body. And my son was then covered in it. It was all through the towel. And I just felt horrible. I felt like my body had completely failed me. I was ashamed. I was upset. I felt lonely. I'm in a hotel room in another country with nothing with me. And and there I am trying to put my son down with this stuff everywhere, blood everywhere. And it was like I was having a miscarriage. I didn't realize at the time that this was a symptom of endometriosis. Nobody had told me about this condition. I'd never really heard of it at the time. But I remember my husband, he walked back into the hotel room and all of a sudden we were like angry with each other. He thought that I'd cracked the shits for no apparent reason. And he was like, why are you so rude? Like, why are you so cranky? Why did you look at me like that? So he's on the defense, doesn't know what's happening. I'm on the defense because I feel unsupported. My body's not working. I'm embarrassed. My body's broken. The whole world knows, that there was blood everywhere and not that anybody even realized. It was just me living in this little horror story of my own. And I've got an 8-month-old child and I'm still figuring things out. Like, why didn't I know any of this and what was happening to my body? Well, over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, my periods would come randomly. Like, I never knew when it was going to happen. I always had pelvic pain, and the pelvic pain definitely came from the cesarean area, and it was traveling in my pelvis. So it was deep. It was somewhere that I couldn't get to. It felt like it was not only from that area of the cesarean, but it was within my pelvis. It was in the joints and the ligaments and all through my tummy there. I tried a lot of things to try and help with the pain, and normally heat would work quite well, so I use hot water bottles a lot. But when you're on holiday and you're not expecting to have your period, and I've only just kind of gotten my period back, and it's like so heavy that I need all of these overnight pads. Well, it was just a horrible experience. And over the next 3 years, I continued to have these really heavy bleeding episodes without knowing when it was going to happen. And so I would carry in my nappy bag with all of my child stuff these overnight pads. And I was worried to go to the swimming pool. I was worried to do anything. I was worried to expose myself to that happening again. And so I kind of just started to keep to myself quite a bit. And instead of this getting better, it got worse. The pain got worse. My periods became a little bit more regular, but they were so heavy. There was a lot of clotting, a lot of blood flooding, and they would go on for days and days and days. And I was still breastfeeding as well. So I was starting to feel like I didn't have the energy, but also that I didn't have the strength to continue. The pelvic pain got so bad by the time my son was about 3 years old that I ended up at the GP, and they sent me to get ultrasounds. And the ultrasounds came back that I did, in fact, have some masses in my body, and they were really concerned that these masses were cancerous. There was no doubt about it. The medical system said that I had to get these tumors out of me and that they were potentially insidious and that I did not have any other option, any other choice. But the thing is, I had already been through an experience that felt like this when I had given birth to my son. When I had given birth to my son, my choice was to have a home birth. And the place that I was living in at the time supported home birth. So I was going through the home birth system preparing for that. But about 2 months before I was due to have my child, we ended up moving interstate. And I didn't realize it at the time, but we relocated to a state where home birthing was illegal. It wasn't even on the table at all. There was no option to go with that at all. My only option was to go to hospital and have my baby there. I'm not a hospital person. I haven't even grown up in like using the Western medical system. So being in that environment was not only completely foreign to me, it went against everything that I understand about healthcare, and the entire experience was both shocking and scary for me. So I went through the process, just quickly, I went through the process of getting as far along in my labor as I could at home. And when I knew that it was going to be happening, my husband drove me to the hospital. And sure enough, I got to the hospital. They had a check of my cervix and I was 10 centimeters dilated. They put me under those fluorescent hospital lights. They strapped something around my belly that was going to be checking on the baby's heart rate. They put a blood pressure monitor on my fingertip, and they wheeled me into the room where I was going to be, in inverted commas, giving birth. I could feel my body contract as soon as I went into the hospital, because the smell of it, the environment, the aesthetics, everything was way too much for myself, for my emotions, for my body, for what I needed my experience to be. And I knew there and then that there was no way. It's like the doctor gave me 1 hour. They said, well, you've got 1 hour to have this baby, and if you don't, then we're going to wheel you in for a cesarean. And I'd hired a doula at the time because that was my only option as far as having an advocate for me. But she was also a midwife at this particular hospital. And she said to me, I have to do whatever the hospital says. Like by law in this state, this is all I can do is advocate for you as much as possible. But if the hospital says this is what's happening, then this is what's happening. And so I knew straight away that there was no ways that my body was going to allow myself to give birth, because I was now like in full contraction, in fight or flight. So I said to them, well, you might as well prepare me for cesarean, because this can't happen in 1 hour. I need more time than that. So I went through the cesarean, and everything was fine. I had a healthy baby. Just think of the positives, all those types of things. And I went home I checked out within 2 days. I left. They said, oh, we want you there here for 4 or 5 days. No ways, I'm out of here. I couldn't stand being there. So I went home, figured everything out myself. The midwife came and checked up on us. Everything was fine. They were surprised at how well I was recovering. And off I went to be a mother, went to learn this new job out with my husband. And we relocated back to where we had started our pregnancy and continued on with our life. But I didn't realize at the time, and nobody ever discussed this with me. I do remember asking about, this scarring that I was going to end up with the cesarean, like how was the best thing, way to look after it and stuff like that. Is there anything that I need to look out for? No, she had a look. No, everything's fine. But I ended up with these really big blobby bits on my scarring. And I've learnt many years later that it was probably some of the tissue of my uterus growing on the outside of the scarring, which ends up as endometriosis. I didn't know this at the time, and I didn't know that pelvic pain is actually very common for women who have cesareans. And I also didn't realize that scar tissue can actually travel. And what happens if you've got endo from having your uterus almost, there's tissue of your uterus on the outside of the scar, then that can start to travel, and that's what endometriosis can become. And this is what I was starting to live with without realizing it. So when I was told that I absolutely had to have another operation to get rid of the fibroids, this was before that I knew that I had endo. I had to have the operation to get rid of the fibroids. There was nothing that was further from what my reality was going to be. There was no ways that I was ever going to end up back on a table doing what some well-meaning medical system wanted me to do. I had so much distrust for this system, and it's not the first time that something like this has happened to me, but that's many other chapters of my story. So I left, and I was hounded by that medical center. They threatened to take my child away from me because the choices that I was making was irresponsible. They threatened to call family emergency services on me because I refused to go down the route that they wanted me to. And I actually had to end up sending letters off to the ombudsman because the medical system is set up in a way that they are meant to advocate for you. And so I sent off to the ombudsman, made a complaint, and that doctor was followed up. So just putting it out there that if you feel like when you go to a GP, your wishes are not heard, it is very important for you to speak up. I never went back to the GP. I've spent the rest of, that was, so this all started to happen when my son was 8 months old. I had really, really bad pelvic pain when he was about 3 years old. And from that moment on, from when I was told that I had tumors and they could be fibroids, but they could be cancerous, I started to treat my body holistically. And I've continued to treat my body holistically and learn about my body along the way. The way that I see these hormonal derangements, these inflammatory conditions, are very different to the way a lot of people see them. But I believe that we end up with these chronic conditions not overnight. We end up with these chronic conditions when we repress emotions, when we don't listen to our intuition. And these experiences, these conditions, are a way of our body trying to talk to us. They become chronic because we repress them for a long, long time. So I repressed those emotions that I felt from having my cesarean, not by choice. I repressed those emotions for a long, long time. At 8 months, I was still going through those emotions. I was very, very angry at the system. I was angry at myself. I was angry at my own body. I was angry at the doula for not standing up for me. I was angry at the choices that we had made to move down to this state when I could have stayed in that state. I was angry that I hadn't done enough research to realize this. I was angry at the midwives for not standing up for me. I was angry at a lot of people, but most of all, I was most angry at myself because I felt that I had failed my child. I know that that may seem ridiculous to a lot of people, but I also know that a lot of women live with that emotion, live with that sense of failure. So over the years, the things that I have done to help my body heal, well, first of all, as soon as I was told that it could be cancerous, I certainly didn't freak out. For me, no matter what it is that we've got, I believe that we can heal from it. I believe that everything is a message for us to take on board and change what it is that we're doing. So I knew intuitively, I knew that I needed to deal with a lot of that anger. So I started meditating a lot. I've got a history of meditation, so meditation comes easily to me, but I really went very, very deep with meditations. I completely changed my lifestyle. I started fasting, stopped eating meat for quite a long time. I'm back on eating meat, but I listened to my body. But I was fasting and long-term fasting, like 3-4 days at a time. We always eat organic, but I made a pact with myself not to eat out at restaurants and stuff. So I only cooked food at home. When I was eating ketogenic. So very, very clean ketogenic and very low meat, both because if it was cancerous, then I would get rid of red meat. But also, if it wasn't cancerous and it was fibroids, then I knew that that was the best thing for my body at the time. Over the years, and initially I purchased a few tools to help my body heal. So I knew from experiencing the pelvic pain that one thing that helped with that pain was heat, which is why often we use like water bottles or we have a hot bath. So I purchased like a heat mat, a red light therapy mat. I was doing saunas with that heat mat just by putting towels and stuff over my body. And it took about 6 or 8 months from when I had that really bad pelvic pain and I went to the GP, got my scans done, and they said that I had these masses in my body. It took about 6 or 8 months for me to feel that my body had come good. And what I mean by come good is when you have something in your body, like these masses, you are aware of them. I mean, maybe not everybody is, but I spent a lot of time internalizing a lot of this experience and I knew where they were in my body. I could actually feel them when I went into meditation. And as I was healing whatever it is that I had, I could feel not only did the pain start to dissipate, but I had more energy, I had more clarity, I was able to be more active without feeling like anything was pulling on my pelvis. And my relationships with myself and with the people around me started to improve. With endo and with fibroids, ultimately, what we have is an excess of estrogen. So we call it hormonal dysregulation. Now, there's hormonal dysregulation, could be any of those, endo, fibroids, PCOS. There's a number of things that you could be experiencing. But a lot of women do have excess estrogen. And so I started to read up about what that meant as far as my lifestyle, because on the whole, we had, and especially once I'd had the baby, and when I was pregnant, we had eaten organic for a long time. So why did I still have this excessive estrogen in my body? Well, I learned that it actually was that my liver probably wasn't functioning well, but also that my environment may have been quite high in estrogen mimicking compounds, which are called phytoestrogens. So these are substances or food additives, but also materials that can mimic estrogen, and then that estrogen is stored in your body if your body is not functioning well. So if your liver is not functioning well, then your body is not utilizing that excess estrogen in your body. And if you're not going to the bathroom enough, then your body is not releasing the excess estrogen through your stools. Now, as a new mum, I was constipated. I think heaps of new mums are constipated, so I wasn't going to the bathroom regularly. Let's get super personal here. I had hemorrhoids, and I actually had hemorrhoids for about those first 3 or 4 years as well, because I wasn't regular. And so I started to learn that all of this is related to each other. So these masses in my body were not the problem, they were the symptom of a systemic problem that I had. And as I started to heal these systemic problems, and constantly, I mean, even my son's 15 now, so, or just about 15. So, over those years, so pretty much over the last 10 years, I have constantly had to continue to learn how to cater to my ever changing body as I go through perimenopause towards menopause, but also to my environment as well. So, what I have learned over the years is, and things that we've changed, is even the clothes that I wear, I'm very careful of what material I put on my body. So I use all organic material. I use material that doesn't have, a lot of chemicals in it, and that can be very difficult to find. But I pretty much shop at like one or two different clothing stores. All our entire house is painted in Lovoc paint. So VOC, I forget what it stands for. It's on the tip of my tongue. But the VOCs in the paint is like, that's that smell in the paint. So you can get paint. We used a brand called Porter's Paint in Australia, Porters. I think it might actually be American, I'm not sure. But it has like no VOC in it. So you can get low VOC and no VOC. So we've painted our whole house in that. We got rid of a lot of the synthetic materials that we slept on and that we sit on. So all of my bedding is like, organic bamboo or organic cotton. We're very careful that there's not a lot of color in any of that. And even like the couch that we bought, it's a Scandinavian brand, and we made sure that, the material that it's made from does not have a lot of chemicals in it. I know that this might seem crazy to some of you, but seriously, when you live with this excessive inflammatory condition, you can go two routes, right? You can go down the route of Western medical system, and you can continue to try and suppress the symptoms, because even studies show that, you can get fibroids taken out, but, you can get your surgery done for your endometriosis. But for most people, within a year, that starts to grow back. So that's what I mean. Like, having this excessive tissue is not the problem. It's a symptom of a systemic problem. So you have to deal with a problem. Our swimming pool has no chlorine in it. I live in the tropics, so we've got a swimming pool, but instead it uses electrodes, which then sanitize the water. So it uses copper electrodes, so we don't have to put any chlorine. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, I have a no chlorine pool. It's a salt chlorinated pool. No, salt, it becomes chlorine when it goes through the machine, right? I used to manage an outdoor swimming pool. It was a salt chlorinated pool. It still becomes the same compound as chlorine. So chlorine, bromine, they're all the same. Salt pool, they're all the same. Very, very toxic for your body. Now, interestingly, and whether or not this plays a role in my experience, I don't know, but I worked in aquatics for over 20 years. So before I got into Pilates, I worked as a lifeguard, a swimming coach, a swimming teacher, and a swimming pool manager. So I was in the swimming pool environment for over 20 years. Now, I know that studies show that the thyroid is very, very badly affected by chlorine. So a lot of people who spend a lot of time in these environments end up with thyroid issues. I don't have thyroid issues, or by the time I went and got my thyroid tested, which was only a couple of years ago, my thyroid is very healthy, but I don't know if that was the case when all of this started. But our thyroid is ultimately, I think of it like it's almost like the battery for the car. If your thyroid is not functioning well, then you're not going anywhere. So your thyroid is involved both in regulation of hormones, your immune system, and endo is definitely an immune response, right? It's like an autoimmune response. So my immune system must have been compromised for me to end up with endo at the time. And now I'm constantly, because then it's like your body becomes overactive or overreactive. I'm constantly having to do things to help my body deal with that overreaction capability. So, I do wonder whether or not chlorine played a role in that. I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised. What else have I done? Well, now because, the heat mats worked so well, I have an infrared sauna and I get in the sauna if I can. I mean, it's at our Airbnb, so I get in the infrared sauna 2 to 3 times a week if I can. And we've actually just purchased 2 saunas for my Pilates studio because I have recognized the healing benefits so greatly, and because we work with so many women who do have hormonal dysregulation. Now, the benefit of infrared saunas are far reaching. So what happens both in a sauna, it helps us perspire. So perspiring is all part of the detox effect. So the body is getting rid of toxins from underneath the skin and sweating them out. That's a good thing. But also the infrared actually goes deep into the subcutaneous level of the body. So there's like the near infrared, the medium infrared, and the far infrared. So they're all different scales of light. And in the infrared sauna, there's those 3 different scales of light, and different scales of light goes into different depth of the body, and it actually heats the body up internally. So instead of just being hot on the outside, your body actually gets hotter on the inside, and studies have shown that that helps with that detox process in the way that it cleans out the mitochondrial cells. So your mitochondrial cells are what help produce energy. And ultimately, I think of when my mitochondrial cells are clean, my mitochondrial cells are always working, right? And I have mitochondrial cells in pretty much every tissue of the body and every organ of the body. And when they are functioning well, it's like, and they function well when we're young. So, all of our processes slow down as we get older. So, but if you think of your cell and it's what is producing energy, then imagine that your mitochondrial cell is a fridge. When I go and buy brand new food and I just put that food in the front of the fridge and I push all the old food to the back of the fridge, then yay, I've got all this beautiful fresh food in the front of the fridge. That's good for me, right? So I'm going to eat all of that new fresh food. But at the back of the fridge, there's all this old food and it starts to get moldy. And then I go into another shop. I leave all that food in there. I push all the new food at the front of the fridge. All that old food continues to get pushed to the back of the fridge. And if I continue to do that, eventually the fridge would fill up and it would have old food filling up most of the fridge, right? And then I have less and less space at the front of the fridge to put good food in. But also that old food is going to start affecting all of the good food in the fridge. So really what I want to do when I go and buy all of my organic fruit and vegetables, I want to take any of the old stuff out of the fridge and put it in the compost and only fill the fridge with new food. So then the mitochondrial cell, when it's just got that new food in it and it's utilized all of that old food, then the mitochondrial cell can work optimally. So the way that the sauna works is that it helps clean out the back of the fridge. It helps get rid of any of that stuff that didn't get used initially, that might just be sitting right at the back of those cells. It helps clean them out. So then your cells can take in all of the food that you're eating, all of that oxygen, all of that water, and really utilize that energy for good. So you can get like maximum capacity. Ultimately, the mitochondrial cells, when they're working well, they are responsible for our aging. So we want to make sure that they're working optimally all the time. You've got to clean out the fridge, and that's what using the sauna does. It's also what fasting can help do. So fasting is like, I always say fasting is the cheapest, easiest option when it comes to mitochondrial health, but also to liver health. So a lot of when we're looking at hormonal derangements, we want to make sure that our liver is functioning really well. So part of the liver's job is to get rid of excess toxins. Some of those excess hormones are also getting dealt with by the liver. So when our mitochondrial cells are working well, the liver is working well, everything is able to evacuate the body. Remember, I think it was on this podcast, I said, for the first 3 or 4 years of my son's life, I was constipated as well. So this was all part of that. I had this excess uterine growth on the outside of what was my cesarean scar, and that was then reproducing and producing and causing way too much estrogen in my body, which then when you've got excess estrogen in your body, it can be very difficult for your body to evacuate, and it clogs up your liver. So what you've got to do is get the liver working well, get those mitochondrial cells performing at their peak, and then your body's able to evacuate. So I find, and a lot of people find, that when you go and use an infrared sauna, it actually helps you evacuate. So it helps you get rid of all of your excess waste from your body. Like, you go to the toilet more often. We should be going to the toilet. We should be pooing at least once a day. But it's really common for people not to be pooing once a day. So if you're not, then you need help with that. And definitely, like, knowing all of this has really, really helped with my condition. Now, I have not had pelvic pain for a long time. My periods are still quite heavy. So as well as doing all of these good things for my body, so the fasting, the keto, I did get off red meat for a while. I'm back on red meat. And you know what? I know I have another friend, she has endo. She actually is on the carnivore diet, and she finds the carnivore diet is the best thing for her body. So that's what I mean when I'm sharing this story with you. This is only my story. This is only my experience. This is what has worked for me. It won't necessarily work for you, and it won't necessarily work for the next person, but educating yourself and having an understanding of why some of these holistic practices may play a positive role in hormonal health, and especially chronic conditions like these, then I think that it can give you a start for a conversation. So the fasting, the saunaing, definitely exercise plays a huge role. Now, when it comes to exercise, because I do get a lot of people asking, well, what should I be doing? How can I help the pelvic pain in the class? Now, in general, when it comes to movement, for me personally, it really depends how my body is feeling on the day. So if my body is feeling good, and so if I have been following all of my lifestyle and health protocols and not suffering inflammation, I can do anything. It's like I'm strong. Like, I'm naturally a strong person. I'm naturally a mover. So I love doing things like control balance front, all of the upstretch, downstretch, anything, jump board, anything and everything. If I'm not inflamed, nothing is an issue. Right. So, and this is my whole point of, like, this condition doesn't define who I am. It's just something that I deal with sometimes, depending on how well I'm treating my body and how well I'm listening to my body. But during those times when I am inflamed, and even, I guess, like around my menstrual cycle, then things definitely change. Now, but this is also going to be really common for a lot of women around their menstrual cycle, right? But things that my body doesn't like when I'm inflamed in my pelvic area are things like nothing laying on my belly. I don't do anything back extension laying on my belly at all. And I don't do any of the more intense abdominal work. So I'm not doing things like hundreds or even coordination. And I'm not even doing things like climb a tree. So anything that is really taking my body into extension or really opening up the front of, of that pelvic area doesn't feel good when I'm inflamed, because I can feel like everything's pulling in my pelvis. I don't like anything where I'm also putting pressure in my belly. So like I said, hundreds, but also stomach massage exercises don't feel good. If I'm doing any of the scooter or skater or Russian splits, then I tend to reduce the range of movement, again, because there's a sense of the tissue within my pelvis pulling, and it doesn't feel good to pull. And in fact, the more that I pull on the tissue, or the more that I press into the tissue, then the more inflamed it becomes. So when I am inflamed in my fibroids or in my endo, then it's not like you've got a tight muscle. I don't want it to be palpated. I want it to be left alone. So I don't do anything that might cause a pulling on it. But things that do feel really good when I am inflamed is any of the 4-point kneeling stuff. It actually almost allows for the pain to be alleviated, I guess, by that suspension sensation, like it's taking pressure any of my organs and stuff. So 4-point kneeling. I might even choose, if I was using all different machines, I might even choose either to do my footwork on the Wonder Chair or on the trap table or tower rather than the reformer. Sometimes the reformer, the in and out, as you straighten your legs, there is a little bit of a pull on the torso. Sometimes if I'm super inflamed and that doesn't feel good, like that even pulls. But if I was doing my reformer footwork and I'm super inflamed, then I might put like a stability cushion or a little ball underneath the pelvis. I do like to do things that feel like I'm working my abdominals, but I'm not putting too much pressure in there. So I'm not doing double leg tabletop, but single leg tabletop does feel okay. I'm not doing jump board with double legs, but I could do some gentle jump board with single leg because one leg is in tabletop, so anything that is a little bit more supported. When I'm doing feed-in straps, then I'm probably not going into my full range of movement because that gets this pulling sensation on my pelvis or just through my tummy in general. So I'm just reducing the range, probably staying more within the confines of the bed. Generally, anything that I would be doing for a pregnant person in the last part of their second term and their third term of pregnancy feels good. So anything of the side lying stuff feels much more supported than laying on my back. So sometimes I'll do all of my footwork laying on my side, feet in strap, or even I put the knee in strap instead of the feet in strap laying on my side. And I even do my arm work, my supine arm work, laying on the side. Definitely all of my kneeling arm work feels good or sitting on the box instead. And most standing stuff feels great. So, like any of my scooter stuff, sometimes I do have to reduce the range of where I'm pushing my leg out to, but the scooter stuff generally feels good. And, if I'm going to do arms and I'm not on a reformer, I'm on the trap table or whatever, then I'll often do all of the standing arm series. Some side overs generally feel pretty nice. I am just listening to my body. It really depends because when you have a flare up, when you've got one of these chronic conditions within the pelvis is flared up, it changes all the time. And the point is that we need to be having this conversation with the person in front of us and getting feedback from them and letting them know that it's okay, that it's not going to be the same all the time. And that's why here are my suggestions. So do you feel comfortable laying on your back? If not, well, what about we lay on your side? Does that feel better? If not, well, what about we try seated? So it's having the support of somebody to say, well, that's cool. If it doesn't feel good, then don't do it. Let's try something else. But then also having an awareness of, okay, well, probably if we do that, then that is going to feel like there's that pulling sensation. And that's probably not going to feel good today, So I guess it's kind of all about us learning from the person in front of us. There's going to be some commonalities with a lot of people, but also just, working with the person in front of us there and then. It's what we do with every single client that we do and that we work with anyway, right? Sometimes I work with somebody who has a knee issue and they're fine to do a little bit of extra load, whereas some days they're not okay to do the extra load. And as a professional, I'm the one who's guiding them for them to learn what feels good for their body. And then we're acting on that together. That's really what it comes down to. I'm definitely walking over running, so I'm not doing a lot of ballistic stuff, but things like walking feels really good. Things like swimming does feel really good. But was it in this episode that I talked about the chlorine? Chlorine is really, really bad for us, right? So excessive chlorine actually affects the thyroid. And I do question that in my own body. I worked in chlorine for about 20 years before I got into Pilates. I was a swimming coach, a swimming instructor, so I was in the pool all the time, a swimming pool manager, a lifeguard. And I don't know whether or not this is part of my condition, but I know now that the chlorine is not good for us and it does affect the thyroid. So it's just food for thought. So, I always say to people, if you're going to swim in an outdoor swimming pool. Not that saltwater chlorinated is any better than indoor, like normal chlorination. Like salt does become chlorine, but at least the water gets oxidized, which means that the sun hits the water and that chlorine very quickly dissipates from the top of the water. So it doesn't tend to be kind of as stuffy, so you get more airing out, I suppose. But movement is definitely key. Stay off the belly, listen to the body. I hope that gives you some ideas. One of the most beautiful things about Pilates, and I think something that Pilates has definitely given me, learning to live with these flare-ups, is that I can take my time. Something that I have integrated more and more into my own practice, and I probably do it a lot more with a lot of people compared to what I used to. So Pilates used to be for me all about moving the body. Now Pilates is all about communicating. So communicating between the body, the mind, and the soul. And so I use a lot of breath techniques. I do have an episode about the vagus nerve, so if you haven't listened to that episode, then definitely go back and explore it, because the vagus nerve is the regulator of inflammation in the body. And the beauty of Pilates is that breathing, but deep breathing, can help stimulate the vagus nerve or tone the vagus nerve to then help with that regulation of inflammation. So I started doing this with meditation. And I continue to do it with meditation, but I also integrate it into my own movement classes, whether or not it's at the beginning of the class, at the end of the class, or even somewhere in the middle. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you as the creator of the class. But breathing, inhaling deep through the nose and then exhaling deep through the mouth, is both great at helping regulate the vagus nerve, but also at tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is our rest, digest, relax, respond, and repair. So this is our time, our moment to help alleviate stress from the body. We know that hormone dysregulation is always exacerbated by excessive stress or chronic stress, long-term stress. So just some deep breaths. When people come into my class and I know that either they are stressed, they have hormone dysregulation, they have any of these endo, pelvic pain, fibroids, PCOS, then we are definitely starting the class with some relaxation techniques. Maybe I do, maybe I don't call it relaxation, but in my mind, I know that that is what they're doing. So it could be something as simple as laying supine. If you're on a machine, you could be laying on the machine with your feet on the foot bar, ready to go, but you're actively taking a few deep breaths and just allowing for any residual tension to alleviate itself from the body. If we start in a state of stress, our Pilates session, then we leave the session in a state of stress. So we want to set the body up for success. And when somebody has a chronic condition, whatever it is, they're already stressed. So first we have to de-stress, and then we have to work in a way that we continue to de-stress, alleviate stress, continue to listen to the body so that the body can respond with that healing tone of the parasympathetic nervous system playing a role in that experience. And then that person will leave as if they're walking on cloud nine. So something as simple as popping one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest, taking a couple of deep inhales in through the nose, exhale out through the mouth, and just allowing for any of that tension to dissolve before you get started can be really, really powerful for that person. It seems like nothing, but it's a whole lot of something. So take time to go through some sort of breathing activity. It doesn't really matter what it is. Just start to integrate it into what it is that you're doing with these people, knowing that that's something that they can take home, and encourage them to practice it at home. You'd be surprised, sometimes as body-centric people, as movers, as people who love, body work and who are in tune with our body, we don't realize that other people are not like that. So other people are not necessarily taking time out to do simple activities like breathing. And if we encourage people to do it and then ask people if they have been doing it, then they're more likely to do so. great changes can happen just by integrating a little bit of breath work both into our session, but then also sending people home with it so that they can practice in their own time. Sending people home with it so that they can practice some simple breath work when they're on the bus, when they're in their car, when they're on their way to work, when they're standing at the shopping line waiting to check out. They're incidental activities that people can incorporate into their highly stressed lives to help alleviate some of that tension. And I know for my body, that has really helped. Like I came from a background where I was taught meditation at a very young age. So I knew how to meditate, but I wasn't necessarily integrating that into my everyday. So I was like up, up, up. Well, I needed to be down, down, down. I needed to calm a bit more. And by learning to calm over and over throughout the day, it helps regulate my inflammation. Now, this is key. I don't know. I don't know how you can help the person in front of you, but they do. So this is where you need to have that conversation and you need to explore with them. So when it comes to fibroids and pelvic pain and endo, nothing is linear. Things change all the time. Sometimes you have a flare up. Sometimes you feel good. Sometimes you've got no energy. Sometimes you've got lots of energy. Sometimes you look bloated, like you look like you're about to have another baby. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me if I'm pregnant again, and sometimes you look super skinny. So things are constantly changing, and sometimes it seems like there's no rhyme or reason. The reality of it is, when we have a flare up, or when I have a flare up, that's normally after a period of time when I haven't been doing the right thing. So I have to eat really well. I do need to fast. I do need to be doing my sauna. I do need to be practicing my meditation, and I need to be doing a lot of self-care. What happens is at some stage, I start to feel amazing. I look at myself, I look fresh and healthy. I have loads of energy. I'm lifting heavy weights. I'm doing heaps of Pilates. I'm moving all the time. I've even gone through periods when I'm jogging. So I'm doing all the things and it feels amazing. And then something might happen, like I might go on holiday. And while I'm on holiday, because I'm feeling so good, I'm going to have a piece of that cake, which I know normally inflames me. I have a piece of the cake and I still feel great. Awesome. I still feel good. Okay, well, maybe in 2 days' time, I'm gonna just have just one slice of the pizza that the boys have bought. Like normally I'm eating salad, but you know what? I feel great. I'm gonna have the pizza and I'm okay. I have the pizza, I'm fine. Awesome. We're still on holiday. We're surfing all the time. I'm drinking my juices, but I'm probably sleeping in bedding that has been washed in chemicals that is highly like estrogen mimicking chemicals, in a place that has a lot of pollution. And then a couple of days later, hey, I'm going to have another cake or another dish. I'm going to have the pancakes. They look so good. Oh, there's fruit with them anyway. I can have a little bit of cream. I'm fine. So over the period of a couple of weeks, I only need to change my environment. I need to add on a few foods that I shouldn't have been eating, and just be in surroundings that are not best for my body. And then I'll come home from that holiday. My body will then start to tell me that it's not happy. My tummy gets all blown up. I start to have low energy. I'm getting cranky. I'm not sleeping well. And all those things start to happen. But it's not like I eat that first piece of cake and my body tells me, what the heck are you doing? Because remember, chronic conditions don't happen overnight, so they don't heal overnight either. But then even with the flare up, it actually doesn't happen overnight. For me anyway. Maybe for you it does. Maybe for other people it does. But for me, it's accumulative, so it'll be things that I do over a small period of time that then start to really feel horrible. And then as much as what it's accumulative, then it takes time for things to settle down again. So then I have to start. And you know what happens? If I eat a piece of cake, then I want another piece of cake. If I eat the pancakes, then the next day I want the croissants. So as much as it's really, really difficult to stick to a really strict, really good diet, like my boys have this joke, oh, mum, what are you going to eat, mum? You can eat dust, So in my house, we say, I eat dust. I don't care. That's fine. The boys are eating all the things, and that's fine. I want them to be able to eat all the things if their body is capable of doing that. My body's not. I'm too sensitive. And I don't know which came first, but a lot of people who live with hormonal derangements also live with IBS or food intolerances, gluten intolerances, and stuff like that. So the best thing that I can do for my body is actually cut everything out and just stick to organic fruit and vegetables, nuts, some seeds, and really good meat, right? But when I don't, then I actually know in my head that I'm going to pay the price. And I've figured over the years that it's almost like I'm just a very stubborn person, and I'm a very high achiever. And it's almost like this challenge that I have to play with myself. So I get to the point where I feel perfect. I feel amazing. I could do anything. And then I have to challenge myself. It's an internal thing. So I don't know whether I'm the only person that does that, but that is part of the game of having this chronic condition. Is I'm constantly having to check in on myself. And I've realized that actually I've constantly got to come back and love myself and respect myself enough to do the right thing. Because when I do have those moments when I eat the cake or the pizza or whatever, I know deep down that it's actually just disrespect, that I deserve better than that. And if I had listened to my body a long, 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 long time ago, because maybe I already was predisposed to having something like a hormonal derangement, then maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't then have to experience the full force of it all. So what does a chronic condition look like 10, 15, 20 years down the track? I think we have choices when we experience these conditions. I've said it before. I don't identify with these conditions. It's not like, they're not part of who I am. They're not part of my personality. They're just something that I deal with. They're just something that I have and something that I live with, but they're not part of who I am. And I think that for me, that is a really important reminder that over the years I've had to tell myself, now I just accept it, I realize it, that everybody has struggles in this life. Everybody has lost somebody that they love, has struggled with something, whether it's in their body, in their mind, whether it's a disease, a chronic condition, a long-term injury recurrence, whatever. Everybody has something. So that whole, I know that there is the landscape is changing and we are talking about it more. And I think that that's really awesome, so that we can share these stories so that people don't feel so alone. But I've never been that person who was like, oh, woe is me, poor me, nobody understands me, nobody knows how I feel, because nobody knows how anybody feels. Nobody is living the life of anybody else. Like even somebody like the Queen, she is struggling in her own bubble of this all she knows. So this life that I have, I don't feel sorry for it, or I don't feel victimized by it. This is my story. This is my lesson. This is partly what I'm here for. This is my blessing. This is my gift. This is a way of giving back to people. This is how I get to serve my community. So if you want to take anything away from this story, I guess that's what I want you to take away, is that whatever it is that you've got, whatever hand you've been dealt with in this life, you have a choice to make of how you are going to respond to what it is that you've been given. Because for me, I respond with love. I respond with courage. I respond with the resolution that I can make my own choices, and those choices are right for me. I make the decision to know that there's only one thing in this world that I ever get to own, and that is my body. And so with the body that I have been gifted, I will love this body, I will cherish this body, and I will honor this body the best way that I know how. And I will always give myself whatever it is that I need in the moment with the time that I have. And I know that however my body responds to whatever it is that I come up with is part of the journey. Because I can tell you now, for many, many years, I did not listen to my body. For many, many years, I had this idea that I had to keep pushing, keep suffering, keep struggling, no matter what, I was just going to push through. Like this was never going to stop me. And eventually, my body spoke up loud enough that it stopped me. But if I had just listened to it in the first place, then maybe I wouldn't be here right now. And that's okay. I wasn't ready to listen. But for most of us who live with chronic conditions, one of the biggest things that we need to come to terms with is that we cannot do it all and that we can take time out, because stress is probably one of the biggest harbors of these conditions that we have in our society today. And we all live in stress. This is part of society. We have to live in stress. Stress is actually what keeps us alive. But if you hold on to that stress, if you don't deal with that stress, and if you don't give yourself time to mourn, to grieve, to heal, and then to learn to love yourself again, then one stress will land on top of another stress, land on another one, and land on another one. So it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to feel like a failure, because it's only through failing that we ever succeed. So I hope that my story brings you a little bit of insight into what it might be like living with endo, pelvic pain, or fibroids. And know that as Pilates professionals, we don't always have the answers. I don't always have the answers for my own body. You know what? I'm constantly having to listen to my own body, and I'm learning better to listen to the whispers. So then as a Pilates professional, what I try and do for my clients is to give them space and to teach them how to listen to their own whispers so that they can step forwards with love and courage instead of run with fear. There is nothing to be fearful of the body. The body is completely competent and capable of getting through anything and of dealing with anything and of healing from anything. Remember, the body is constantly working towards homeostasis, towards balance. It's our job to do what we need to do to give ourselves space, to give ourselves time, and to give ourselves all of the nourishment that we need to be able to sit in that balance. My name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Pilates Lounge podcast.